Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. This is the virtual user group for IMS, so thank you for joining us. My name is Amanda Henley. If we haven't met, I'm the managing editor over at Planet Mainframe. So very happy to have you here with us today. We are going to talk, I've got a couple of introductory slides. We'll have our presentation. We're going to do our Q&A at the end, but obviously if you have a question that's going to impede your learning along the way, you can drop it in chat. And then at the end, after Q&A, we will cover any news or articles out there and talk about what's next. Wanted to go ahead and do a call for sessions. We are planning our 2026 virtual user group calendar. I'm actually planning them across all of our categories, IMS, DB2, and KICS. So if you have something you'd want to share with the IMS community, you can send me an email at amanda@planetmainframe.com or through the Planet Mainframe website. And I'll also drop my email address in chat in a minute. Um, it is time for the 2026 Arcadi survey. If you are not familiar with the Arcadi survey, every year we produce, Planet Mainframe produces a report called the Arcadi Mainframe Navigator. And we've been doing this report for about 3 years. Prior to Planet Mainframe producing it, Trevor Eddles was producing it, and I think it might be in close to its 20th year of production. But it is a great report. It is unbiased, vendor neutral, and really has a lot of great data about the mainframe industry, about trends, overall usage and performance metrics. And this survey is now open. I'm going to drop the link in chat as well. And we're looking for survey responses for the Arcadi mainframe user survey. It is a longer survey. For that, I apologize, but there were so many questions and we wanted to give you a really robust report this year. Also, with the Arcadi Navigator report is the opportunity to be featured as a vendor partner of the report. You can claim your free directory listing, boost your brand visibility with report sponsorship. The Arcadi Navigator has some sponsorship and free directory listing opportunities in it. And now we're here for our session. We're ready to go. I'm going to stop my screen share. We're here for IMS Managed ACB's mandate after 6 months, adapting to the new normal. Anshul Agrawal is a senior manager of product development at BMC Software, where he leads innovation for the BMC AMI Data for IMS and AI for IMS. And let me know if you're having any trouble getting your screen share set up.
Let me know, Amanda, if you can see
Oh,
my title
looks
slide.
great. Yeah, it looks wonderful. I will turn it over to you, and I'm really looking forward to the session. We talked about the ACB mandate within this user group a couple of times, and I'm curious to see where we are today on it.
Sure. Thank you, Amanda. First of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity to present on this platform about IMS managed ECBs. We all know that a lot of people, experts have talked about this topic over last several years, whether it is Deepak Kohli from IBM or we have experts from BMC and other vendors. But again, it's important to reiterate where we stand, especially after the recent IMS GA version of IMS 15.6, from which IMS managed ECB is mandatory. So it was GA in June 2025, and we are in November. So officially, it's not 6 months yet, but the whole idea is to just step back and look at where we stand and where we are heading it into the future. So myself, Anshul Agrawal, I am a senior manager product development at BMC Software, taking care of BMC AMI data for IMS, specifically backup and recovery and fast path utilities. And recently, I took the additional responsibility of AI for IMS, where we are bringing in AI capabilities on IMS offerings from the BMC, whether it is Gen AI, machine learning, or agentic AI. You will be hearing about that more early next year. So yeah, I will be turning off my camera now just to save the bandwidth because I am based out in India and I'm working from home because it's basically late in the evening for me. So we don't want to take a chance, and I will turn off my video and we will continue from here. Okay, before really deep diving into how the last 6 months looked like and where we are heading in the future, I think it's important to reiterate some of the history which is related to IMS catalog and IMS managed DCBs. So we all know that IMS catalog got introduced in IMS version 12, which was introduced sometime in 2011, which is almost 15 years back. And 15 to 18 years back, a lot of customers reached out to IBM, right? They expressed some concerns that they love the power of IMS, but they want IBM to simplify the maintenance and the management of, IMS control region and IMS databases. And we all know that DB2 become more prevalent during that time frame, and all the customers wanted that. They love the performance of IMS, but they want the simplicity of DB2 to be able to manage IMS database same as DB2 database. And that is when the seeds of IMS catalog and IMS managed DCB has been planted. We know that DB2 also offers DB2 catalog. So on the similar lines, IMS implemented IMS catalog. So let's take this as an example. Assume that there is a bank database with a few set of segments. Let's assume there is a customer segment, card segment, and account segment. And you can always correlate this with the DB2 database. So if you have a DB2 database called bank database, it could be set of three different tables. And we know that DB2 is a relational database, which is nothing but tables, collection of rows and columns. So in DB2 terminology, it is basically three tables: customer table, card table, and account table. But in IMS terminology, this is a collection of segments. So these are three segments: customer segment, card segment, and account segment. And we all know that when we define this to the IMS, we have to code a DBD definition. And we have to code several assembler macros to define how these, bank database and these different segments will look like. So most of the time, we only define some key fields and the important details of these segments. So in the customer segment, we might only define customer ID, customer name, customer address, and customer phone number, which might only, adds up to 100 bytes. But your customer segment might be of 500 bytes. So rest of the details might be in your COBOL copybook, or it could be in PL1, or it could be in your assembler, DSEX, and so on and so forth. Similarly, for the card segment and account segment, you might have only relevant, fields in your DBD source definition, and rest of the definition is stored as a part of your metadata in your COBOL copybooks. And when I say metadata, it is nothing but the data about your data. That is your database definitions, your PSB definitions, and things of that nature. So the whole idea of introducing catalog is to ensure that the management of this metadata can be simplified, right? Because in the past, this information was dispersed in different areas, whether it is COBOL copybooks, PL1, C include members, or assembler D6. And there was an increasing demand of accessing IMS database from Java through different regions like JVP or JMP. And if you want to access the data using Java, you need centralized management. That does not really mean that the access from Java was not allowed before IMS version 12 when IMS catalog was introduced. I think that was allowed even from IMS version 7. But before that, we used to have this utility called DLI model to create the Java class files. But again, the management was not that easy if you're using DLI model for different Java programs. So in IMS version 12 in 2011, this IMS version 12 came as a GA. And the initial GA version, there was no support for IMS catalog. It was introduced little later, but shortly after, IMS 12 came into existence. Okay. So as I mentioned, IMS catalog was the strategy to make it look more similar to the DB2 catalog and also enable Java applications to be able to access the IMS database. and make the metadata management more easier with the centralized management. So this was the optional system database from IMS 12 onwards, which was introduced in year 2011. And surprisingly, or maybe some people wonder why this was implemented as an IMS database itself. Imagine IMS database is housing the IMS metadata, and this was implemented as HAL-DB, which was basically PHIDEM, OSAM, implementation. And a lot of people ask this question in different webinars, why, HAL-DB is chosen as the implementation of IMS catalog. So one thing which was very clear from the IBM architects who all designed this stuff, uh, over the period of time, these things will only grow. So obviously, it has to be either HAL-DB or DEDB, which supports partitioning and large volume of data. But the reason they have not chosen FastPath database to be an IMS catalog database, primarily because IMS FastPath database does not support DLI batch. That was the biggest reason. The second reason is not all the customers are familiar with, FastPath DEDBs, and they don't have the utilities to maintain FastPath DEDB. These were the two main reasons, IMS catalog was implemented as HAL-DB, PHIDEM, OSAM implementation. A lot of customers, and some other experts ask why it was not implemented as, VSAM. But obviously, at that time, OSAM was, something developed primarily on the request of IMS database to ensure that it can go even beyond up to 8 GB. And that is the reason OSAM implementation was, chosen over a VSAM. And it's obviously an IMS database, so it makes management more easier. And it is a trusted and online source for IMS database and application metadata information. We'll be looking at those details in few slides to come. And this was made accessible via both standard JDBC SQL call, which could be done through COBOL SQL also from IMS 13 onwards, or you can do a traditional DL1 access calls. There was a special call which got introduced called GUR call, GUR call, and the results will be, returned in the form of XML, which you can parse and process. And there were multiple versions of metadata that can be stored. And this statement can be, interpreted in two different ways. So there was a database versioning which got supported from IMS version 13. That is, you could have a, multiple versions of the same database. So obviously, those multiple instance of your metadata can be part of your catalog database, or there could be multiple occurrences of the same database. So let's say you do a DBD gen and ACB gen and you populate the catalog. So that will create one occurrence. And let's say you are not satisfied with that and you will create another, you will do another DBD gen after making some changes in the DBD source. You will do the ACB gen and you will populate that into the catalog, and that will create a second instance in the catalog database. And let's say you do this 10 times, so that will create 10 instances in the IMS catalog database. And for some customers, obviously that's not, very uh, required outcome, because at some point you have to clean up those 9 instances or the occurrences in the IMS catalog database which got created, and you're only going to refer to the most recent entry. And for that reason, there was a utility developed called catalog purge utility, with the help of it, you can basically purge those older 9 entries from the database. But why it was implemented that in the first place, I think the main reason was just to have some kind of backout mechanism in place. If you're not happy with your latest changes, you can always fall back. But I don't think that was ever implemented by IBM to support that fallback mechanism with those old occurrences in the IMS catalog database. So let's quickly talk about the technical metadata from the IMS and database perspective. And we always talk about three terms when we talk about IMS managed DCB. We know that IMS catalog is a prerequisite for IMS managed DCB. So we talk about catalog databases, we talk about repository, and we talk about, IMS directory datasets. And a lot of time, these three terms are confusing for customers, but they are not the same thing. They are different thing, and they are there for some reason. So I've already talked about, IMS catalog database. It was implemented as HellDB database. What does it contains from the database perspective? It has your DBD and PSB definitions. Obviously, your database structure definitions, physical database definitions, segment definitions, and field definition. From a PSB standpoint, it has data types, application defined fields, encodings, redefines, user defined data types, and structures. So all this basically constitute and basically stored in your catalog database. But when we talk about repository vsam, it's a different thing. That's not directly related to catalog and IMS managed DCB. It's more related to DRD, but it is always being talked about in conjunction with these concepts. So that is more equivalent to your whatever your IMS gen process produces, right? When you do a mod blocks gens, you have program definitions and the transaction definitions that get stored there. You have format resources, you have input output message definition. And the third thing is the IMS directory dataset, which is very much similar to ACB Live, and it's an extension of your catalog database. So your metadata information is stored in catalog in a database structure format, and then same thing gets translated into IMS directory dataset, whose format is very similar to ACB Live dataset. Obviously, the main difference is ACB Live datasets were PDS and the IMS directory datasets are PDSC. And obviously, there are operational advantages of using PDSC over PDS. So you might have seen this picture several times if you have, gone through some of the Deepak Kohli's webinars in the past, or maybe BMC or some other vendor webinars. Maybe recently you might have seen that in GS UK conference somewhere. So this is how your IMS catalog DB looks like, and we know that IMS is a hierarchical database. So this is how the structure look like. So you have a header, and then you have two main segments, that is the DBD and PSB, and there are several other segments which are reserved for future use. So if you look at the left hand hierarchy, these are all the macros like the dset, area, DBD remark, all these macros, field macros, marsh macro, L child, and all this are the macros you basically code on the DBD source definition, right, before you do the DBD gen. So for each of these macro, you have a dedicated segment type in the IMS catalog database. And you might notice that there is a special segment type called DBD vend, again, which is a child of a DBD segment. And the whole idea of providing a DBD vend segment is for vendors like BMC, rocketsoftware.com, or maybe for some customers, they might have their homegrown macros, which they use to code in the DBD source. So IBM provided a way to store that specific information in a special segment called DVD vend. And the vend is for the vendors. And same thing they provided on the PSB side. We know that we have different macros, the PCB macros, the sensec, the sen field macros, and they provided something called as PSB vend, which is for the vendors to store their vendor specific information for PSP. And they provided a secondary index database, which is directly associated with the DBD XREF. And the whole idea is to identify which all PSBs are referencing which particular DBD. So you don't really need to read the entire list of DBDs just to identify your, PSB or DBD intent list. You can directly get that information through the secondary index database. And one more thing which you might notice here is there is a color coding here in this diagram, and that color coding is there for a reason, right? You should see that there are four different datasets group: DSGA, DSGB, DSGC, and DSGD. And DSGA is in white color, DSGB is in gray, and then green and blue. The reason of this color coding in this diagram is all those segments which are in white color, they are the most accessed segment in general from the IMS and database standpoint. Then all the segments which are in gray color, which are in dataset group B, they are most exist, but after the dataset, those segments which are part of dataset group A. And similarly, the dataset group C has those segments which are exist more than dataset group D, but less than dataset group A and B. And similarly, the segments which are part of dataset group D, they are the least exist among these four categories. So that's the reason, and that's why you have this color coding. And IBM provide some utilities with which you can look at the structure of this database, because as a DBA and probably sometimes as an application programmer, you need to understand the nitty-gritty of how the structure is, how the data is getting stored. As a vendor, BMC also offers something called as catalog manager, where which can help you list down this structure and try help you understand in more detail, because at some point in the future you definitely need to know more details of how catalog database looks like, and how the structure is, how the records looks like, and things of that nature. And after IMS catalog, obviously, which was the foundation for IMS managed ACB, because for IMS managed ACB, which is nothing but a directory implementation, IMS catalog is a prerequisite. So when we say IMS managed ACB, what exactly that means? We talk about IMS directory datasets. So I've already explained IMS catalog database, VSAM repository for DRD implementation, and we have third thing called IMS directory. So when you implement and enable IMS directory dataset, that is when you say that you have enabled IMS managed DCB. So IMS catalog is a prerequisite for IMS managed DCB and directory enablement. And without that, you basically cannot enable IMS managed DCB. And the whole and the sole reason of doing IMS managed DCB is to ensure you would be able to run DDL in the future. That's the main reason we as a vendor community, IBM and all the customers are going through this migration journey and are adopting this solution for the future, so that you will be able to run the DDL on IMS database. It's very similar to create table space, create table, create program views. If you have to implement a change, it would be alter table space, alter table. There is no alter program view. I think you have to drop and then you have to create again, and those kind of things. Basically, to ensure that if there are DB2 DBAs who are taking care of DB2, schema changes, with their similar knowledge, they can manage the IMS database schema changes with the similar kind of TDLs in the future. So the whole idea of going to IMS catalog, obviously one thing was to enable Java applications to be able to access the data. That's more on the DML side of the thing. But for the managed DCB, the whole reason of going into this is to be able to use DDL in the future. And that is the direction where IBM is going, and all the customers and the vendor community is moving to be able to use the DDL. So in IMS version 14 and above, users can optionally enable IMS management of ACBs, that is database and program views. And that was true until IMS 15.5, right, where you can optionally enable IMS managed ACB, that is the catalog and directory datasets. But from IMS 15.6 onwards, IMS managed ACB is mandatory. Your IMS control region won't come up if you are not using IMS managed ACB with 15.6. And that basically enable IMS to build, activate, and load your ACBs in memory dynamically from catalog when the database and program view definitions were created via DDL statements, the way I explained, like create table space, alter statements, and delete and drop statements. And your ACBs are stored in IMS directory, which is an extension of IMS catalog database. So in the past, we were only having the ACBs, but in the newer regime, we have catalog, which is an intermediate database. And the extension of the catalog database is directories, which is equivalent to ACBs we used to use in the future, in the past. And the IMS management of ACBs is enabled by specifying ACB management equals to catalog in the catalog section of TF STF XXX Proclive member. So yeah, Mike, you have a question that what APR that activates IMS 15.6. So we have a slide on that in next few minutes. We'll be talking about that. Okay. So let's quickly look at the timeline, how it all started. As I mentioned that IMS 12 version came into light in 2011. So it's already been 15 years, right, since IMS catalog was first introduced. And obviously, it was thought long before that to implement IMS catalog. So we are almost, getting closer on 2 decades when this was all started designing, and now this is a reality in 2 decades. And I think we are looking bright for the future. And in 2015, IMS managed DCB was introduced with IMS version 14. Obviously, it was optional at that time. In October of 2015, the GA release came in. And basically, the IMS managed DCBs is nothing, but it is an infrastructure to, basically support your IMS DDL statements or DDL mechanism of making schema changes. And in 2019, IBM again released a statement of direction, which has to do with, making sure that IMS managed DCB will be mandatory in future, and the manual ACB management will be, seeing the, uh, end of the tunnel. And then again, there was a reiteration in 2023, in summer of 2023, where IBM reaffirmed that the transition timeline and started revamping the tools and the support for adoption. And in June 2024, last year, IMS 15.5 release came in that has a lot of enhancements for IMS catalog and managed DCB support, and that was preparing for that mandatory transition. And in 2025, in June, we have IMS version 6, 15.6, which basically makes IMS managed DCB a mandatory requirement for all the customers. Okay, Amanda, do we have any questions in the chat which we need to address before we move on to some of the next slides?
There's no new questions in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I think I mentioned IMS twice. IMS latest releases. Okay, so IMS version 15.3, it became GA in June of 2022. And at that time, IBM decided that there will be new function level every year. So they introduced IMS 15.4 again in June of 2023. And IMS 15.5 was released in June of 2024. And that was the last IMS release when IMS managed DCB was optional. And here we come in 2025, and in June, IMS 15 got released. And with that, IMS managed DCB is mandatory. So if you look at this timeline, this 15.6, 15.next is nothing but the 15.6. And this GA summer of 2025 is basically a June of, 2025. And I think there was a question like, what is that APAR that enables IMS 15.6? So we'll be talking about that. But IBM also taken care of the fact that those customers who are yet not prepared to move on to the IMS 15.6, how they would be able to get the regular maintenance and keep applying the fixes. So IBM provided some mechanism for that, and we'll be talking about that in next few slides. There's a term called IBM marker PTF, which enables this release specific. So like for IMS 15.5, there was a marker PTF, which enables IMS 15.5. Similarly, for IMS 15.6, there was a marker PTF, which enabled IMS 15.6. But if you as a customer are still not ready for IMS managed DCB and need some more time for the migration and planning, what IBM recommended is to skip applying that marker PTF. And you can remain on IMS 15.5. And if you don't apply that marker PTF for 15.6, you can still be able to get the PTFs fixes for your regular maintenance or any problems or enhancements, which you would be able to apply on top of 15.5 if you have not applied the marker PTF for 15.6. And also IBM ensured and gave a confirmation that there will be new there will be no new PTF for which IMS 15.6 marker will be a prereq, because otherwise that will automatically pull the 15.6 marker and apply it. So that will not going to happen in future, and that will give customers a more, a legway to ensure they are successfully migrated to IMS managed DCB. So this is the slide which talks about this marker PTF for IMS 15.6. These are the two PTFs or the APARs, FH64705A and FH64706A. And this was introduced as a part of IMS 15.6 migration path. And the major change with that is a stricter validation of IMS managed DCB configuration. And if you have an improper setup, your IMS initialization will fail with the user abend 71. And you definitely need to ensure that you have a proper catalog setup before you can migrate to IMS managed DCB. So this has more details of what these APARs and what PTF these APARs contain. So primarily there are two APAR with this set of PTFs, one for the base IMS, and the other one is if you are using Java. And if you are using Java, you need to get this APAR to enable IMS managed DCB. And within this base APAR, to enable your IMS control region to support IMS 15.6, there were different PTS for database manager, transaction manager, your base IMS subsystem, and some of the other IMS components. So all this information is also available on IBM website, but you can always refer to this tech to ensure you have the required PTFs. But if you skip this marker PTFs, you will still be able to apply the regular maintenance on top of IMS 15.5, and that maintenance will not prereq this PTFs, and they will not be pulled to be installed. So with the introduction of IMS 15.6, as I mentioned that IMS managed DCB become mandatory, there are a few common setup errors in the messages which we have noticed, and it's also documented in IBM manual. So if you have no catalog section in DF-STF member, your IMS control region will basically append with user append 71, and it will issue an IMS message that section catalog is required, because now this is no longer an optional parameter from IMS standpoint. If catalog section is present, but it says catalog equals to N, because we know that for IMS managed DCB, catalog is a prerequisite. So again, it will append with user 71 append, and this is the message that you will get, which says that ACB management equals to catalog is required when catalog is equals to Y. And the another one is if you have catalog equals to Y, but ACB management is not specified, or it says ACB live, in that case also it appends with user 71 append, and it will say that ACB management equals to catalog is a requirement. And you have catalog equals to yes and ACB management equals to catalog, which is a prerequisite for catalog and managed ACB, but you have no catalog and directory setup. In that case, your IMS fails at restart and it will say error allocating IMS directory bootstrap dataset. So bootstrap dataset is a special kind of dataset which is used to keep track of your active directory datasets and also the staging dataset information. It is very similar to that datasets, the OLC stat, which was used in the online change, which used to tell you what is the active ACB live when the IMS is processing particular ACB live. I think it's important to look at the history of database and application change evaluation over the history of last 50 years in the IMS arena. Okay. So the first one is the IMS gen and restart. Uh, in the very beginning, I think in IMS version 3 and 4, there was no online change. And what you could simply do if you have to introduce a new database, like the one I explained, the bank database with those three segments, what you need to do is you need to simply do, IMS gen to define your databases, to define your transactions, and that will populate the information into mod block. And you will need to do your DBD gen and ACB gen and populate that information in ACB live. And you will simply restart your IMS, and IMS will read the information from mod blocks and ACB live and build that information into the IMS storage, and that is where it will live. So that was very old method when some of these enhancements were not available. Later on, there is a process called online change came into existence, and there was a concept of mod blocks active and mod blocks inactive. Similarly, ACB live active and inactive, and you will simply do your mod blocks gen, stage them into inactive mod block library. You will do your ACB gen, stage your changes into inactive ACB lives, and you will do the online change that will basically switch your inactive mod block to active mod block and inactive ACB live to active ACB live. Then obviously, as I mentioned, there was a DRD implementation which could either be RDDS or IMS repository, which has your gen kind of metadata. And there was an introduction of import definition source either from repository or from RDDS dataset, and that will activate the resources in the IMS control region. But with the introduction of IMS catalog, obviously there was another type 2 command. So this import definition source and import definition source for repository and for catalog is a type 2 command. And with the introduction of the catalog version of it, obviously you can stage your changes into the staging directory. You will still do the dbd gen, ACB gen, and you will do the catalog populate that will move that information from ACB live into the catalog IMS database. And you will also populate your staging directory. And probably you might do some changes using some kind of vendor utilities like, let's say, unload and reload. And you will stage your changes in the staging directory, run unload and reload. And once you are satisfied, you might want to activate that resources in the IMS control region. And for that, you will do an import. And that will move the resources from staging directory to active directory, and it will also refresh that information in the IMS control region. And obviously, we have implemented IMS managed DCB with the whole and sole reason of using DDL in future to make it more similar to the DB2. So this is how it will look like in the future. Some of the customers have already started playing around with the DDL. We at BMC also started testing and playing around with the DDL. Because that is the whole reason of we are migrating to IMS managed DCB. So instead of coding your DBD source, PSB source, doing DBD gen, PSB gen, ACB gen, those things will go away. And you have an equivalent DDL statements where you will say create table space, create tables, create program views, and those DDLs will be submitted. It will be creating an entry in the IMS catalog and also in the staging directory. And you might test your application changes and the database structural changes using some kind of vendor utilities like unload and reload. You will implement that changes, and at one point you have to activate those changes in directory. You can either do an import, or there is an auto import feature available with DDL, which will automatically activate your resources in the active directory and IMS control region. So this last stage is the TDL stage where we want to go. A lot of customers, I'm pretty sure, they are either on this online change stage, or they might be in this catalog stage. Some customers has implemented DRD. Some of them are still using the conventional mod blocks gen process. But most of the customers are lying from this gray timeline to this orange one. And this is the future or the ultimate target for everyone, for IBM, for BMC, for other vendors, and for all our customers, which matters the most. So everybody wants to go and wanted to use DDL to make management of your database and application changes seamless and make it much more simplified the way it is done in the DB2 world, and still enjoy the power of IMS and IMS databases. Okay, be moving on to the next slide. So we all know that DDL is still being tested out. There are still some issues which IBM is working on, but that is the future where everybody is going, right? So what to do if you have already converted to IMS catalog, and if you've already converted to IMS managed DCB and DDL is still few ways away, what should be the mechanism that you use in the interim? Until you fully transition to DDL, your gen processes are gone, your ACB live, DVD live, PHB libraries are gone. So let's take the same example. Let's assume there is an IMS control region, only one, and you have this same bank database, which has three segments: customer segment, card segment, and account segment. And you want to add the fourth segment, that is the reward segment. What you will generally do today? So obviously you have an existing DBD source, which has the definition of these three segments. You will take that existing DBD source, make some modifications to add the fourth segment, that is the reward segment. You will do the DBD gen, you might add some new PSBs, you will do the PSB gen, and you will eventually do the ACB gen. And that will populate the resources in ACB live. After that, what you need to do, now you have catalog and directory datasets. There are two kinds of directory dataset. One is staging directory dataset and one is active directory dataset. It's very similar to like inactive ACB live and active ACB live. So first you need to stage your changes like you used to do in the past on inactive ACB live. Here you will be staging your changes in the staging directory. So once you have done the ACB gen, you have the information in ACB live that has the reward segment also. You will populate your catalog using cat pop utility with managed ACB equals to stage, and that will populate the information into the catalog dataset, and that will indicate a your resource is pending for activation. So there is a pending timestamp, which that flag is set in the catalog dataset because that's not an active instance. So IMS will not refer to that entry, so that is still pending for activation. And what you will need to do, you also need to populate the same information with this fourth segment added to your existing DBD source, and you will do the catalog, you will do the directory load where you will load the information into the staging directory. And probably at that time, what you will do, you will do an unload reload. Unload will read the existing definition from the active directory, new definition from the staging directory, and will implement that schema changes where you have this fourth segment added into the database. And once you are satisfied, probably you will run the import that will move the control blocks from the staging directory to active directory, and it will refresh the control blocks in the IMS control region. In place of import, you can also use a vendor offering like what BMC offers, that is a Delta, also known as change manager for IMS TM, to activate your control blocks in Active Directory and IMS control region. So that alternative is also available. A lot of customers use that today. So this is how your life will look like once you have migrated to IMS catalog and managed DCB, and you have not fully embraced the DDL. But post transition to DDL, what will happen? Basically, this entire boxes, ACB Gen, ACB Live, this will go away. So the only option that will be left is to do a DDL. So instead of modifying your DBD source, adding new PSBs, doing DBD gen, doing PSB gen, doing ACB gen, doing catalog populate, doing staging directory load, we will simply run the DDL. And since we are making changes to the existing DBD, those will probably be alter table spaces and alter table statements. And there might be new PSBs, so there will be create program view statements. And you will run those DDL. IBM also developed something called a ZDDL, which makes life more easier, especially for the testing purpose to test your DDLs. And that will create a entry in the catalog database, which is obviously pending activation. It's not a valid entry from IMS standpoint unless it's activated using import command. Again, you might use vendor utilities like unload and reload to implement that change. And once you are satisfied, you will run the import that will populate, move your control blocks from staging directory to active directory, and refresh the information in the IMS control region. So this is how your life will look like when DDL is going to be the only option in future. And uh, that will only at some point in future that will be the only option available to be able to run the DDLs. Okay. So your DBD lives, PSB live, ACB live, and Gen processes, they will completely go away, and you will be moving on to the DDL uh, methodology. Lot of customers with whom we talk to, and the information that we have shared with Deepak in some of the common sessions, they have different implementations of IMS, right? So just for the demonstration and example purpose, we have considered one IMS. But in real and practical life, obviously there will not be single IMS. There will be multiple IMS. And in production, we know that it could get as complicated as 10 IMS, sharing IMS databases in an IMS Plex environment. So what to do, let's say just for simplicity, if you are talking about two IMS control region, IMS S1 and IMS S2 in a data sharing environment in an IMS Plex, and if in your current implementation you have shared ACB lives, that is your IMS 1 and IMS 2 are sharing your, you know, ACB lives, probably you will go at the implementation of shared IMS catalog and shared directory. You will only have one set of IMS catalog database and one set of directory, and your IMS will refer to the same set of IMS catalog database and IMS set of directory. Some customer might say that this is a single point of failure. If something happens to IMS catalog, something happens to your IMS directory, you are pretty much uh, unrecoverable from that standpoint. And especially in some of the lower level environments, I've seen that customers have shared, non-shared ACB lives. They have separate ACB lives for IMS1 and IMS2. And if we are talking about that kind of configuration, probably your setup will look like this. You have IMS1 and you have IMS2. You have a separate IMS catalog for IMS1, and that is identified by IMS catalog alias. And in that case, it is IMS1. Generally, we and IBM recommend that you keep your IMS catalog alias same as your IMS ID. That is easy to identify which catalog is associated with which IMS subsystem. And similarly, you have a dedicated set of directory and a bootstrap data set for your IMS1. And similarly, there is a IMS2 where you have a separate IMS catalog, and that is identified using catalog alias name of IMS2 with a different set of directory data sets. In this kind of scenario, you can say that you are avoiding single point of failure, but it brings a complex operational challenges because you need to ensure that your IMS catalog 1 and catalog 2 are in sync, and your directory sets 1 and directory sets 2 for IMS 2 are in sync, because they will not be automatically kept in sync if you have different catalog and different directory data sets. And we have seen that a lot of big customers, they do have this kind of complex arrangement where they do have separate ACB lives, and they are going this route, or they have already implemented separate catalog and separate directory datasets. A lot of vendors like BMC do offer some utilities. So we in BMC have database integrity set of offerings which you can use to ensure that your control blocks in directory set 1 for IMS1 is in sync with your directory datasets for IMS2, and ensure that they are always in sync and maintained in a consistent manner. Some of the customers have even more complicated setups where, let's assume there are three IMS subsystems in an IMS Plex environment: IMS1, IMS2, and IMS3. IMS1 and IMS2 are sharing ACB lives, so they will also share IMS catalog, and they have been identified as DFS1, which is the catalog alias for IMS1 and IMS2. This is how the DFSDF XXX member will represent for IMS1 and IMS2. And your IMS3 is using a separate set of ACB live. In that case, it will have IMS catalog, a separate IMS catalog, which will be identified as DFS3, and it will have its separate set of directory. Generally, this type of implementation is not there in production, maybe in pre-production environment, which is there just for the backup and fallback purposes. but I have seen a few customers who have this kind of arrangement, and this makes it very difficult to ensure everything is in sync, and when you are implementing changes, everything is well coordinated amongst these different IMS subsystems. But we do have some customers who have this kind of implementation as well, which is called shared and non-shared IMS catalog in IMS managed DCBs. As I mentioned that when IBM architects design IMS catalog, they chose IMS database itself as an implementation mechanism. So as like with any other IMS database, whether it's a customer database or the bank database we have looked at, we need to ensure that you do all the administrative tasks for this IMS catalog database also. Because now this is your most critical database, very similar to probably one of the critical customer having a database. Okay, uh, there is some question, Amanda, that we need to address, or should we address them at the end? I'm not closely monitoring the Q&A in the chat. Okay, probably we'll have a look at them uh, at the end. So what I was telling is we do need to ensure that we take care of all the administrative tasks, right? Similar to what you will do for any other IMS database. So we talked about this populate utility, right? Obviously, you need to ensure you take backups, like you take backup of any normal IMS database. You need to ensure that you do the reorganization, because over a period of time with a lot of activities, there might be a lot of fragments which gets created in your IMS catalog database, and the performance of your IMS catalog database access might not be up to the mark. And you might need to use reorganization to ensure that you eliminate that fragmented space and your database is healthy. You will need to do some kind of maintenance. From time to time, IBM might introduce some kind of non-structural changes to the catalog, or there could be times when there could be a structural changes to the IMS catalog database. A very recent instance, we noticed that IBM is implementing fast path secondary index support for DDL, and they made some changes in the IMS catalog database that has basically introduced some kind of structural changes to the IMS catalog database. And when they do these kind of changes, I am pretty sure Deepak's ensure that all the customers and the vendor community is kept informed what is the best practices to implement those kind of structure changes on the IMS catalog database. Even if you are not using some of those features like fast path secondary index, there are very few customers who uses fast path secondary index. Still, the recommendation is you implement those changes which are coming with those APARs, that is introducing structural and non-structural changes to IMS catalog database. So yeah, those things are there because at the end of the day, it is a database. So you have to treat it like a database and ensure you are taking care of all the aspects, whether it is backup, reorganization, maintenance. Obviously, in case of disaster, you need to ensure it's recoverable. And as I mentioned that if you are doing DBD gens, ACB gen, populating catalog, it might be creating repetitive entries in the catalog database, and there is something called as catalog purge utility, which can help you to purge the old records from the catalog database. One more question that I've commonly got from a lot of customers is that they are using IMS for decades, right? And they have thousands and thousands of DBDs and PSB members in their ACB life. But some of those applications and database may be obsolete now. And when they simply do a mass catalog populate and directory load, everything gets translated into the catalog and directory dataset. So those are kind of obsolete entries that are there in the IMS catalog database. How they can handle to ensure those are cleaned up properly. So I think the only way as of today is to run DDL and drop those resources from the catalog and clean up your directory datasets. What I've heard from Deepak in some of his webinars is there are There are few enhancements in future that might address that and automatically take care of that kind of scenario. So we should be able to hear more of that. But I think when you migrate to IMS catalog and manage DCB, I think that is the best opportunity because you might be taking some outage to ensure that you are cleaning up those obsolete entries which is no longer needed to be maintained. They can obviously backed up somewhere just in case from the compliance perspective because a lot of customers have some kind of compliance requirements. Even if the data sets are obsolete, they need to maintain some backups. And we as a BMC do offer a utility called archive image copy where some of those resources and the image copies can be preserved and for the compliance perspective, just in case you need to recover that after, let's say, another 5 years, you can do that. So again, reiterating, the future will be the DDL. That will be the only option to implement changes. You will be adding the reward segment to the existing database structure, running DDL, doing the commits that will populate the entry in the catalog with the pending timestamp. Your resource is pending for activation. That will also create an entry in staging directory, and you will test your changes, do probably unload reload, and once you are satisfied, you will do the import or maybe using BMC AMI change manager for IMS and activate these resources into the active directory and IMS controlled region. And this is how the life looks like, because in the previous scenario, you know that you have this kind of DBD source where you have different assembler macros. And we have seen in the very second slide that how the IMS catalog structure looked like. For each of these assembler macros, you had a specific segment type in the catalog database. But this is how the life will look like in the DDL world, because instead of DBD source and all this information, you will have a create data space, database, you have create table space, you have create table, and all this basically gets translated into DDL. And one question that I get from a lot of customers is they might be having, thousands of DVDs and PSBs, and to convert that to the DDL form takes some effort, right? Because nobody is going to manually convert each DVD source and PSB source into its equivalent DDL source form. So there are utilities from IBM, from some other vendors, and also BMC, which can help you convert this DVD source into an equivalent, DDL form. So there are all permutation and combinations are possible. You can create from DVD source and get an equivalent DDL source. If you have DVD live, you can disassemble that and create a DDL source, because a lot of times what we have heard from customers, they don't have the DVD sources or PHP sources available. They only have the control block, right? So there are utilities both from vendors, other vendors, BMC and IBM, which can help you get these resources built from catalog, directory dataset, ACB live, DBD live, PHP live, and also from the source dataset itself if you have DBD and PHP source preserved. This is how the PSBs look like. So you will have different PCBs. In the newer DDL world, you will have a create program view. You'll have a create schema with these different syntaxes. I know that if you're an IMS DBA, getting used to some of these things on the DDL side of the house is not straightforward. It requires a mindset change. But definitely, that is where the future is heading, and everybody is slowly will start getting used to the DDL form of making changes. Okay, I know there are some side conversations, but Amanda, I'm not sure if you are monitoring it. Maybe we'll have a look at some questions in the end if there are something to address. But yeah, I appreciate. I know there are some experts. I noticed Karen Tischer is here, so obviously she can answer a lot of questions on the same lines. But yeah, we'll have a look at
Yeah,
in the end.
I think it's worth opening um, that conversation when you're finished.
Sure.
Not an expert. That's why I'm listening to you.
Yeah, Karen. Everybody knows, so we are good. Thank you. Okay. Uh, so yeah, we talked about IMS catalog. We talked about IMS managed DCB. One more thing that you need to worry about is if you are using vendor utilities from some vendor like BMC, you need to ensure that they support IMS managed DCB, right? Because your maintenance procedures depend highly on those utilities. And if they don't support managed DCBs, you won't be able to make those changes. So it's important to understand how vendors support IMS managed DCB and what change for them and what changes they need to make at their end to ensure it supports managed DCB. And probably it is less complicated than what IBM has implemented to support IMS catalog and IMS managed DCB and all these utilities that they've offered in last several years. From a utilities perspective, let's say whether you are running talking about pointer checker, reorg, extract, or you're talking about unload and reload to implement any kind of schema changes, right? One thing they need to know is to read that metadata from ACB live, right? Or DBD live in some cases. So there are two things from vendor's perspective. They first need to determine whether you are running in managed ACB environment or whether you are still running in ACB live environment. So first is the determination piece. Second is once you have determined and what you have determined is that it's still in the ACB live or DBD live environment, you will go your normal route and you will treat the DBD live and ACB live as PDS and probably do a simple BSAM read that has always been done since last several decades, right? But let's say your utilities determine that you are running in IMS managed ACB environment. There is a API which IBM offers called DFS3 CatQ, which can help you to read the information from directory. Because now what is changing for vendor utilities, instead of reading the information from DBD Live and ACB Live, which was most of the time hard coded in the JCL, now the same information, because I mentioned that the format of the metadata is same, whether it is stored in ACB Live or directory. Now the same information is stored in directory. So instead of reading from ACB Live or DBD Live, now we need to read this information from directory. And how to read it? There is an API called DFS3 CatQ. So we as a vendor, we have added the code that after the determination of IMS managed DCB, we need to use this API if we are running in managed DCB environment and to be able to read the information from directory. Once the information is read in storage, the format is pretty much same and your existing parsing logic will basically works the same way. So from vendor perspective, I know I might be making it very simpler and the developers at BMC might not be happy because they have done more work than what I've described in this simple diagram. But yeah, at high level, basically they have added the logic to do the determination correctly. And once the determination is done, they are reading the same information from directory, and for that there is an API. You do an API call, you get the information and just pass the information in the same way what you used to do when you are reading the information from DB Live and ACV Live. And there are differences when you are running some of the utilities in online fashion. A lot of utilities sometimes run in these dependent regions, right? Whether it is for fast part databases, it is IFP region, or there could be BMP or MPP regions, right? And there could be purely batch execution, like what I've talked about, unload and reload. So when you are using in online mode, there is one IMS control block called DFS3ACH that is called catalog anchor block, right? So when IMS comes up, it builds this control block in the IMS control region called catalog anchor block that has all the information about whether you are running in catalog environment, whether you are running in managed DCB environment, what is your catalog database, what is catalog alias, what is the directory dataset name, what is your staging directory, what is your bootstrap dataset. All that information gets built when your IMS region starts up at the beginning. And if our utilities are running in online fashion, they will simply go to this control block and get all the information. It will determine whether your catalog is enabled, whether your directory is enabled, and it will read the information from directory in that case. So this is the most trusted information IMS maintains at the IMS level. When it is up, this control block is always populated, and you can refer to this information and figure out if which kind of environment you are running, whether it is IMS catalog, IMS managed DCB, what are the different data sets and things of that nature, what is IMS catalog alias name. But if you are running, so this is the macro. So if you generally IBM supplies this macro to all the vendors and to the customers. So look at your installations, IMS MacLive, and go to this source DFS3ACH. You will see this dissect. It's an assembler dissect. It's very similar to copybook in COBOL. So these are some of the important fields which tells you whether catalog is enabled, directory is enabled, and what is the staging directory dataset name, what is the bootstrap dataset name, what is the high level qualifier of managed DCB dataset name, and things of that nature. So all that information is readily available in the control block, which is mapped up by this DSEC called DFS3ACH. But when you are using this stuff in offline mode, obviously you're most likely your IMS control region might be down, like the one in case of DLI batch, right? That's why IMS catalog is implemented as HellDB instead of FastPath database, which I love at BMC because I've always worked on FastPath database my entire life. But if you're running in offline utilities in offline mode, not in any of that dependent region, these are the different mechanisms. So these utilities offer some special DDs where you can code catalog specification, directory specification. You can code the high-level qualifier of your IMS catalog bootstrap dataset, and it will determine the rest of the information. Obviously, this requires making JCL changes. So that is not what BMC recommend. And this basically the method is similar for other vendors. They offer a similar kind of stuff. They have some special DDs and these different mechanisms I'm going to talk about. Even IBM utilities, whatever they offer, they follow a similar approach for the determination and reading the metadata in case of offline execution of these utilities. The second one is the DFS3CDX, which is the IMS catalog definition exit. This is a assembler exit, which is a kind of exact replica of the DFSTF XXX proclime member, uh, the catalog section, the IMS manage DCB section, and all the different sections you can have in this proclime member. So this is the assembler equivalent of the same proclime member. So what BMC and most of the other, IMS community recommend is to use this exit. And I have noticed that a lot of customers who have already successfully migrated to IMS managed DCB, they are already using this exit. So just code this exit. It's very easy. If you know COBOL, probably you will be able to code this exit. IBM do provide a sample of this exit. Code this exit, assemble this exit, and include this exit in your step like concatenation, and you are probably done. You don't need to make JCL changes for 2000 JCL. So that is the most recommended method. If you're not using that and your IMS is referring to this DFSTF XX proclime member, these utilities can read the information from this proclime member also. And if you're not using any of these three things, obviously DFSTF XX proclime member specification also requires a GCL change. There is some effort at your end. But let's say if you're not using special DDs, you're not using IMS catalog definition exit, you're not using this proclime member. We know that catalog is a HellDB, and most likely this is the only HellDB which is not needed to be registered in Recon. But obviously, everybody recommends that you register it in Recon because you might have to recover your IMS catalog database in test systems. You might not register it, but I think all the higher level systems and in production you will definitely register your LDB into your recons, and if it is registered there, it will automatically figure out and get the high level qualifier of bootstrap dataset and rest of the information related to catalog and IMS managed DCB. And this whole mechanism is very similar whether you are using X vendor utilities or Y vendor utilities. Let me take a simple example because I think in some of the earlier slides I have taken a reference of, let's say you are making a schema changes. If I take a same bank database where you are adding the fourth segment, that is the reward segment to the bank database, how you will go about making that change in the earlier world when you are using ACB Live, and how you will go about making the same change in the newer world when you are using IMS managed ACB and probably DDL. So you have an unload utility from some vendor, let's say vendor X. Your unload is referencing to IMS ACB, which is your existing definition that only has those three segments in the bank database: customer, cards, and payments. Now you want to add the fourth segment, that is the reward segment. You will do the DBD source change. You will do the DBD gen. You might add some new PSBs. You will do the ACB gen, and you will populate that information into new ACB live, and your unload will refer to the IMS ACB for the existing definition, new ACB for the new definition that has that fourth segment added, and it will create an unload file. Now that unload file will be fed as an input to the reload process, and this reload will refer to the new ACB that has that fourth segment added into the existing database schema. And then this reload will create a new database, right? This is how your world looked like in case of ACB live environment, but how it will look like in IMS managed ACB. Again, you have a similar unload utility, and it is referencing to the current definition, which has only those three segments from the Active Directory. Now you have populated in a similar fashion. You've done the DBD gen, PSB gen, ACB gen, but after adding that fourth segment and probably some associated PSBs, you will do the catalog populate that will create the entry into the catalog database with the pending timestamp, which means your resource is pending for activation. You will do your directory load where you will be updating your staging directory with this new information, and then your unload is referring to this staging directory. It is referring to the active directory for the existing definition that has only those three segments. It is referencing to the staging directory that has that fourth segment, which is the reward segment added to the bank database. It will create an unload file, and then it will be fed as an input to the reload process. And if you have not imported your changes, your new definition is still in the staging directory, right? So your reload is referencing those SEBs from the staging directory. But if they are imported to Active Directory before reload, then reload will refer that information from the Active Directory, as I mentioned here. So it will create new DB. But if you have already migrated your control blocks from staging directory to Active Directory using import, or maybe BMC utilities like change manager for IMSTM, in that case, reload will refer to the new information, which has that fourth reward segment added into the existing database structure, and it will create your new DB. So that is how the life looks like, and this is the time when you are still transitioning to the DDL. Later on, all your gen processes will go away, your catalog populate and directory load will go away, and in this process, that will be replaced with the DDL, and that DDL will create an entry into the IMS catalog. So obviously, you don't need a catalog populate, and that will create an entry into the staging directory. So you don't need a directory load, and unload will work in the same way, and you will import the changes and do the reload, or probably do the reload first and then import the changes, and you'll have the new DB. And your IMS has a new definition since you have imported the changes, and you can simply start the database. So yeah, life will be very different. For now, the only additional step is the catalog populate and directory load. But when you will be dealing with DDL, all these gen processes, catalog populate, directory load will be gone, and you will be entirely dependent on the DDL processes to ensure your control blocks are there and it's in the same format. We do get a lot of questions from the customer who started playing with DDL, how they will ensure that the control block, which was created with the DBD gen, PSB gen, and ACB gen process, is same as the control blocks created with the DDL process, right? because eventually your catalog and your directory now have the control block, and the source will be DDL instead of these gen processes. So as long as these control blocks are same, all the other utilities applications should not be affected. So some customers reached out to us that do we offer any utility? So as a part of our database integration, you know, database integrity offerings, we do have utilities where you can compare your control blocks from one library to another, and it will highlight what changes it has, and if there are changes, it will flag it. If there are no changes, which is expected in most situation, it will not flag any changes, and you can ensure, you know, everything is fine. So we need to ensure that all our vendor utilities are working correctly, even when the control blocks are populated using DDL instead of a traditional gen process. Customers need to ensure that their processes are working fine. They might have a DevOps process where they need to tweak this control block generation process, and they need to ensure everything is fine, and it will be fine as long as the control blocks generated by gen process is same as the control blocks generated by DDL, and it should be same in most instances. And we at BMC also started an effort where we are making sure that when control blocks are generated through DDL, nothing is impacted. Obviously, IMS also has to read these control blocks. And we know that IMS works with DDL, which means that control blocks are same, either it is created through gen process or through the DDL process. Okay, let me talk about some of the challenges that we have heard from some of our customers, and in some of the sessions from Deepak and Tracy also in some of the conferences when I met her. So we talked about, real IMS implementation might have, 10 IMS subsystem in an IMS Plex environment sharing different databases and application. So coexistence in Sysplex environment, and if they are in a shared environment, probably you need a simultaneous migration. And how you will ensure that the coordination and scheduling of this kind of mass changes is coordinated. That's one of the most complicated thing to do if you are doing most of the things manually. Again, we do have some solutions as a BMC vendor. We offer BMC AMI Change Manager that can help you coordinate this kind of changes at the mass level. Then obviously there are a lot of scripts, the recs and C list, which have been written over several decades, which helps you in generating these kind of control blocks and validating whether these control blocks are accurate. There could be multiple ACB lives, right? There are throwaway ACB lives where customer just put something, test something, and throw it away. The same is not true for catalog, because you have to create an entry in the catalog and then do a catalog purge. A catalog is referred by IMS. It's not a throwaway data set. So all your older scripts, you need to ensure that uh, if they are obsolete, you have to make corresponding changes. If you are using DevOps, you might have some automated workflows. You need to ensure how you incorporate catalog approach and how you can incorporate this new catalog populate and directly load utilities and purge utilities in your workflow. So you definitely need to make changes into your CI/CD pipeline for implementing some of these changes. As I mentioned, we are almost getting close to 15 years and more. And obviously, there are some customers who are early adopters, who runs cutting edge technology. They are always at the forefront of, testing anything. So they obviously experienced and faced a lot of issues initially when all this started in 2011, because this was not a simple change, probably one of the biggest change in the history of IMS ever in last 50 years and more. Obviously they faced the disruptions when they were testing in some of their lower level environments, but they've learned from their experience and they have done their job. They shared their experience with the IMS community through different forums. Since your IMS catalog is a database, we need to ensure that your backup and restore processes are refined because it is like any other database. You need to take backup and have a restore process in place to ensure if something happens, you are there, restore it with the minimum data loss and as fast as possible. So your existing backup and recovery procedure definitely needs refinement. A lot of new DBAs are getting onboarded. I think that's a common challenge across the industry in mainframe. A lot of experienced DBAs are retiring, new DBAs are joining. The same challenge for vendor. A lot of new workforce is joining, and experienced workforce is retiring. So there is a significant challenge of retraining those programmers and DBAs. A lot of new SQL and DDL knowledge is essential because things are not exactly same how it is there in the conventional DDL world, because there are some IMS glossary and IMS grammar that you need to follow, right? So there is definitely some learning curve. Even if you are well versed with SQL, you need to ensure you understand the IMS terminologies. They tell table, we tell segments. We still say segments, right? Even when we are moving towards TDL. So that's a terminology difference, and slowly we'll understand what we say in this new world, in the DB2 world, in the relational world, how things are called and relate to that in the IMS terminology of the IMS world. Comprehensive training and documentation need was there, in-depth workshop and hands-on labs for DBAs, sysprocs, and to some extent even for application programmers. Though for application programmers, most of the things were transparent. Ton of documentation on catalog management best practices, different utilities which are being offered. If there is a vendor who is adding support, different kind of documentation updates were needed at their end, and continuous learning. We know that we have several IMS managed DCB, IMS catalog sessions from everyone. We go to any conference, there is definitely a session on IMS managed in IMS catalog. But I think it's important as we are moving, because things are evolving. We have new learnings and experience every day. So it's important that we share that within the IMS community to learn from each other. So continuous learning is required, refresher sessions are required to address the evolving need, and it's very much needed even in future to talk about IMS managed ACB until we reach DDL and it becomes mature, which I think is still few ways away. Lot of customers these days have regularity requirements, like something like DORA compliance in Europe region. They need to prove the recoverability of all their databases. And now IMS catalog database is an important asset. IMS directory is an important asset. So they need to prove the recoverability of those assets, because if those are not recoverable, your IMS database probably is not recoverable. Your recons probably is of no use, and you need to assure you have consistent backups are being taken similar to any other database, and that's of paramount importance. As I mentioned in the past, it's very important that you check with your vendors whatever utilities you are using from them. They fully support IMS managed DCB. There is no scope for last minute surprises, because we are already at that time when migration should have already been done, or you've already started into that journey. But if let's say some vendor has not reacted to this, you might be stuck because they don't offer support for IMS managed DCB. But I think that's not the case with majority of the vendors. So what are solutions for these problems, and what have already been implemented? There were a lot of sharing lessons learned through user forums. So we know that this is one of the IMS user group community. There are a lot of regional IMS user group community. There are tons of webinars Deepak and his team has done, whether it's IMS catalog, IMS managed ACBs. BMC did a series of 6 webinars last year. We have a link to that. And in different conferences, definitely there are a lot of sessions in GAC, Share, and you name a conference there, which includes IMS. There is definitely a session on IMS managed DCB talked about by some SMEs or an expert. We need to collaborate on troubleshooting and best practices. We need to leverage some of the common resources. There is something called as IMS listserv, which is a good community for all the IMSers across the globe in the world to effectively communicate with each other, share the best practices and probably the lessons learned to ensure that the other users are not running into the same problem, or if they are running into the same problem, they already know what is the way to go about it. And we have to accelerate adoption through peer support networks because that's the journey. We all need to be on the same boat, whether it's IBM, vendors like BMC, or customers. We all need to agree that this is an important change, important milestone, and IMS has survived for more than 50 years already. But if IMS has to go for next 50 years or more, I think this change is critical, and this change is a forward-looking change, and this change is embracing innovation and the future. So I think we all need to ensure we all adopt, agree, and move towards implementing or migrating the changes. Reach out for help either to IBM or your vendor with which you are closely working with. Use of a lot of industry standard automation tools like Ansible, right? IBM offered a lot of Ansible playbooks, which basically uh, automate your migration of IMS subsystem, IMS catalog database. BMC also offers some modified playbooks. Some additional things were included, so you can always reach out to IBM and to your vendors. They will definitely help you with some automation that they might have already developed. And that significantly reduces the manual intervention and errors. If you are using automation, which is already incorporated best practices and the recommendations and the experiences from the past, there is less likely that you will repeat the same mistake when some customer implemented IMS managed DCB maybe 10 years ago. Always use a phase approach. Start testing in the pilot environment first, right? Ensure you are satisfied, your changes are well tested, and then start rolling out into different environments from your sandbox to your development to your integration to your pre-production to your production eventually, ensuring minimal impact on production because by the time it moves into the production, you have taken care of almost everything. Always have fallback plans and rollback procedures during deployment, especially for production implementation, because at the end of the day, this is software and we are human. Even in the age of AI, there is always chances of something going wrong. So there should always be a clearly documented fallback and rollback procedures that you should document and follow, and everybody should have a proper education on that. Development and employment of catalog-aware backup tools. Although IMS natively offers some backup tools, but I think it's always important if for your IMS database you are using some specialized backup and recovery tools, it is probably a good advice to use the some specialized backup and recovery tool even for your IMS catalog database to ensure you have faster restore times and minimizing downtime. There is a term in backup and recovery world called recovery time objective. You need to ensure your restore time is as less as possible, and recovery data objective, that is you need to ensure you have a minimal data loss. And in today's day and age, probably you can afford zero data loss. There should not be any data loss. You need to be able to recover to any point in time, whether you're talking about your IMS database or whether you're talking about your IMS catalog database, which is a system database. Ensure you are reducing the risk of catalog mismatch or corruption during recovery. Have some mechanisms in place. Revisit your scripts, revisit your recovery procedures. Make sure you have additional validations because some of these things will be done for the first time and there is always a possibility of making some mistake. We all know that directory has been implemented like a PDSE, and PDSE has operational advantages over PDS, which most of the mainframe educated people know. And obviously, it offers improved space management and performance. So that is definitely having an upper hand compared to PDS datasets. In today's day and age, we are using AI, right? Whether it is generative AI or probably we already started talking about agentic AI and things of that nature. So I did the same thing. I asked AI how the life of a DBA looks like after IMS managed DCB. And these are some of the answers I got. I think most of them are accurate and some of them are debatable, like what I had to learn. So I have to understand IMS catalog structure, versioning, the active definition tracking. As I mentioned, there is a pending entry, there is an active entry. Dynamic load and activation. When IMS picks up the new database and DBDs, rollback plans you need to learn. If you are already using DevOps pipelines, the CI/CD with Git and Jenkins, you need to see and understand how those are impacted, what kind of changes they need. Then you need to understand the troubleshooting, reading catalog and manage the ACB messages and conflicts. The message that we have seen in the beginning in one of the slides, what are the different messages you get? You need to make yourself aware with, oh, okay, what are those new messages? What does they mean? If those messages come, what action you need to take, right? Those things you need to learn. And what you can do now, deploy new transactions without outages. And that will be true, especially in the DDL environment. You can run some parallel PHP versions in production. You can spill a developer sandbox instantly. You can enable rapid prototyping on the live IMS data. I think this is not totally accurate because some of the things you can even do in non-managed ACB environment, especially if you have some specialized vendor utilities where they offer, creating developer sandbox systems or in an automated way, creating a rapid prototyping environments, which can be up and running in few minutes, probably compared to few weeks. And what changed in my work as a DBA? So obviously no static ACB like build for every change like we used to do in the past. Probably that is still true until we totally transition to DDL. Same day deployments and minimal downtime. That's always been a need of every organization. Business hour updates and fewer weekend operations. There is a multi-version PSBs for different test environments and phased rollout and closer collaboration with the application teams. So I think this AI has given at least 70% accurate answer, and some of the things will be achieved in future if they are not already achieved. But I think I just thought I'll play with it and see what AI gives me when I say, okay, how the life has changed with IMS Managed DCB in last 6 months. But this is how the ideal life will look like in few time to come, maybe months and years, if not several years, few years. So there are some key takeaways. Migrating to managed ACB is mandatory requirement if you want to go to IMS 15.6, which is highly recommended. Migrate your IMS systems to manage DCB. Implement IMS catalog. Implement IMS manage DCB. If you have not already started on that journey, reach out to IBM. Reach out to BMC if they are your preferred vendor. Start on that migration journey because most of the big customers, they have migrated already. They are running managed DCB in production and they are successfully running it without any incidences. Proper planning and preparation are essential for success, but definitely all those who have already implemented, they have their lessons learned, they have their best practices which are shared across the community. So it's important to leverage the available tools and the utilities to streamline that process and learn from the experiences of other IMS users, as I've already mentioned. So these are some of the references from the IBM material. So there is a IMS Managed DCB webinar series which Deepak has ran. So the link to this is can be found here. You can also go to IMS Global LinkedIn channel where you can get all the access to this kind of resources. There was a dedicated series on IMS catalog webinar where they've talked about catalog, its maintenance, what are the best practices, fallback procedure, things of that nature. There is a frequently asked questions, you know, on IMS catalog and managed ACV. Again, you can find that on IBMZ and Linux One community, but the references to that is also there on IMS Global LinkedIn channel. There is a dedicated IMS managed ACB IBM white paper. It's a very comprehensive document. I have read that personally, and I think I found it very, very useful. I have shared that with a lot of customers, and I highly recommend if you're starting your journey little late, this is probably a good place to start. It has a lot of good details. And at the same time, we as a BMC offered a lot of webinar on this different managed ACB catalog concepts, how different BMC IMS offerings got affected, what you need to do, what are the best practices, what are the automation that we developed, what are the frequently asked questions from our customers. Some of them I have covered in this session today, so you can leverage that. This information is available on BMC IMS community's YouTube channel, and these are the QR code. You can scan them. You should have access to them. And if you are BMC customers, I'm pretty sure you're already engaged with us. But if you have any question, even as a general community member, reach out to us and see how we can help. Reach out to Deepak, reach out to Tracy. They are all there to help you in this migration journey. There was another IMS managed ACV white paper I wrote, which got published on the BMC communities channel. If you are interested in that, refer to this QR code. That's more geared towards, BMC utilities and what you need to do as a BMC user. And then all this 6 webinar series is also posted on BMC community blog post, where you can get access to all those 6 webinar and the links to those recordings which are stored on the YouTube. This is my QR code. If you ever want to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free to drop me a message and I will be instantly connecting with you if you have any questions. Because still, I don't consider myself as an expert. I'm still learning, and there is so much evolving in this space day in and day out. There is always something to learn related to IMS, related to IMS catalog and manage DCV. But if you are interested in connecting with me, feel free to drop a message and I will reply to you. If I don't have an answer to your question, I will definitely try to get that answer from an expert at BMC first because I have more reach within the BMC. If not, I'll definitely try to get the answer from Deepak and his team at IBM. So yeah, Amanda, that's pretty much whatever I wanted to cover. I think I've took exactly 90 minutes, which is more than what I've initially planned, but I think I've tried my best.
Thank you so much. I know there was a lot of conversation in chat, so I want to give, if we could, a little bit of opportunity to make sure everyone's questions got answered there.
Okay,
And your screen share is still on, by the way.
okay, let me stop that. Let me see what are the questions on the chat. Okay, what is the APA that activates IMS 15.6? So I think we've already covered that. And I think there's a comment from John, when they will end, they will announce the end of service so that we can stop dragging this on. I think it is very important because especially for IMS 15.4 and 15.5, which are the two last IMS versions, which still supports IMS managed ACBs as an optional configuration. IBM has still not announced end of service for that, which means some of the customers who are still on IMS 15.4 or 5, they might take their sweet time to move on to the 15.6. But it is highly recommended from BMC and from IBM that you start on it if you have not already started on this journey. Don't worry about when the end of service will be, because if that is announced, that will create a panic. And if you are working in panic situation, there is always a possibility of making mistakes. So it's important that you start now. If you have not already started, reach out to IBM, reach out to your vendor. They will definitely assist you. We all are together in this journey. How do you recover IMS catalog without the ACB live and reorganization? So as I mentioned, you need to refine your backup and recovery procedures. IMS catalog is another database, another hell DB. So you need to ensure you are taking the backups. Most likely use specialized backup and recovery tool from some vendor which offers comprehensive backup and recovery tools to ensure you can recover to any point in time. So do the same for IMS catalog database and maybe much more. And I think John has already clarified it's another LDB, and it has bunch of utilities which IBM offers out of the box from IMS. So that's not something which is offered with any regular IMS database. So obviously there is more to be offered on this. I know that, but they don't need the DVD and PSB info eventually. So I think these are some of the conversations.
You can just skip that.
Yeah, yeah, I think we have covered most of the things because most of these are some comments, and I think we really welcome this side conversation also because it helps and give context to the wider community about what we are talking about. So yeah, Amanda, I think I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. Um, we will post the video and slides and everything in probably in about a week. And let me get my shared. Okay, great. So we'll get all of that posted shortly for y'all to check it out. And let's see what we've got. So from news and announcements, let me drop some links, like I promised earlier. Chat, just to make things a little bit easier. There was an announcement that ties into IMS kicks in DB2 back in October. Um, for y'all to check out about Agentic AI. I know I was just at GSUK last week. That's how I lost my voice, and there was a good bit of buzz about the capabilities and what we're going to see there. And with that, I don't think I have any other announcements. You can get involved by connecting with us on LinkedIn or the virtual mainframe user group on YouTube. And also, I should add that Planet Mainframe just launched a YouTube channel, which feels a little bit like we're behind the times, but actually, we've had all this great data or content, and we wanted to make sure we had a better way to share it. So we've got the Planet Mainframe user group as well. And they are linked. If you go to the Mainframe virtual user group, you can link over to the Planet Mainframe one. In chat, I dropped the user survey, our Caddy mainframe user survey, and other ways to get involved if you're looking for more of a sponsor presence, including our free listings in the vendor directory. So you can check those out. And then lastly, I am working on a potential bonus session in December, but I'm not sharing anything about it yet until we get it all buttoned up. But if I don't see you next month, I want to say happy holidays, and I can't wait to see you in the new year. With that, we're all done for today, and y'all have a great rest of the week.